Have you ever felt stuck, like the world was against you? Like no matter how hard you tried, nothing was ever enough? Stop now and take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear might change everything. Sometimes, a story can awaken something inside us, that strength that was hidden, just waiting for the right moment to appear. So, if you've ever thought about giving up, don't leave. This message is for you. Look, I know what it feels like when the world comes crashing down on you. I've been there. You know that moment when you think everything you've built just falls apart in the blink of an eye? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. I had a job that I thought was my safe haven. That stable job, you know? You start making plans, thinking you'll stay there, slowly growing, building a career, climbing one step at a time. And then suddenly, poof. You lose everything. I don't even know how to describe the feeling. It's like you're sinking, and the only thing keeping you afloat is hope. And then comes the hardest part, guilt. Why didn't I do more? Why didn't I fight harder? I felt incapable. What was I going to do now? With so many bills to pay, no backup plan, and the feeling that time was running out. I was lost. Honestly, I didn't know where to turn. That's when I stopped and thought, yeah, there's nowhere left to run. There's no looking back anymore. If I want to move forward, I need to take the first step. Just one step. I remember sitting on my couch, holding my phone, thinking, I'm not going to sit around waiting for someone to tell me what to do. I knew it wouldn't be easy. It wasn't going to be one of those stories where everything magically falls into place. No, I knew it was going to be a fight. But I decided that no matter how scary it was, I wouldn't let it defeat me. That's when I called Lucia, you know? She was my boss for a long time, and we lost touch after I left my job. But deep down, I knew she had always believed in me, and that was exactly what I needed. I didn't even know what to say, I just knew I needed a push, some advice. Hey, Lucia, I said. I'm lost. I don't know where to go, what to do. I need help. Hey, calm down. We'll figure something out. Tell me, what happened? And the conversation went on. It wasn't anything grand. It wasn't a magical solution. But at that moment, I felt something inside me start to change. I didn't have all the answers, but maybe, just maybe, I was beginning to see a way out. And you know what? I started to realize that, deep down, the first step was to stop waiting for things to just fall into place. The first step was recognizing that, even in the middle of all the chaos, I still had the power to change something. And that first step was already progress. That was my first day of starting over. It wasn't anything spectacular, there were no applause, but it was the beginning of something that, though I didn't know it at the time, would change my entire life. I remember what happened next. It was when everything seemed to be at its worst. I was at home, my head filled with uncertainty, my phone trembling in my hand. After talking to Lucia, something inside me started to change. I didn't know if it was hope or just a desperate impulse, but I decided to try. I had no money, no direction, no plan. And the idea of starting over felt like an impossible mountain to climb. How could someone who lost everything possibly turn things around? I looked at my reflection in the mirror and asked myself, who am I now? Am I the person who lost everything, or am I the person who can start again? That was when an idea started to form. I didn't know where it came from or why I thought of it, but something inside me told me I needed to do something I never imagined I would, start from scratch, for real. You know, sometimes we're so afraid of what's ahead that we'd rather hide in what's comfortable, even if it means staying in pain. And that's what I did for so long. I hid. But that day, in that moment of hopelessness, I decided to face it head on. I decided to take the first step, even without knowing what I was doing. I started writing in my notebook, simple things, small goals. I want to learn something new. I want to find a way to make money from home. I had no idea how I was going to do it, but I started planning. And at first, it felt like a joke. How could I, someone without even a steady paycheck, change my life? But as the days passed, I began to realize that the secret wasn't in big changes but in small daily actions. I started waking up earlier, organizing my day, writing down everything I could do to improve my situation. Each day, I felt a little stronger. But look, don't think it was easy. It wasn't. With every failure, every mistake, I felt the temptation to give up. I had gotten so used to losing that the idea of winning seemed impossible. More than once, I asked myself, why keep trying if everything always goes wrong? And that was when the switch flipped. When you have nothing to lose. So why not try? I started giving myself permission to fail. Every mistake was an opportunity to learn. I remember one day in particular, I was trying to sell something online, and of course, I sold nothing. I was devastated. But instead of sinking into that failure, I looked at it and said, okay, I'll try again. And I did. And I failed again. And I tried once more. I knew that if I didn't give up, eventually, something would work. But let me tell you, the moments of weakness were intense. The loneliness, the fear of not making it, the weight of all the wrong choices I had made over the years. It was a lot to carry. But I couldn't stop. I had promised myself that, in the end, things would be different. One thing I learned, the journey is never linear. There will always be that one day when you wake up thinking it's impossible to keep going. But the key to everything was realizing that failure isn't the end. Failure is just part of the process. And I was willing to embrace that process, even when it felt like I was drowning. I wasn't waiting for luck or the perfect opportunity anymore. I was creating my own opportunities, one failure at a time. You know that moment when you feel like you're finally on the right path? I lived through it, but it wasn't anything grand, no movie-like celebration. It was something simple, but to me, it meant the world. After weeks of trying to find a way to improve my situation, I started to realize that the problem wasn't in the big things but in the small actions of daily life. I didn't need a stroke of luck, I just needed to keep going. One day, while making lunch and thinking about everything I was trying to do to get out of that hole, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a revolutionary idea, but it was the beginning of something. I thought, what if I started saving money for real? It's not grand, but it's something I can control. The idea was simple: cut expenses, make smarter choices in my daily life. I always spent money on things I didn't need, like that daily coffee or buying ready-made meals instead of cooking at home. So, I decided to do something small. I made lunch at home and put the money I would have spent into a jar. It seemed like such a tiny thing, but when I saw that saved money, I felt like I had achieved something real. I know, it sounds silly, but to me, it was my first victory. It wasn't a huge amount, but seeing that money saved gave me a sense of control. I wasn't just waiting for things to change anymore. I was doing something. It wasn't a big deal, but I knew I had started changing my habits, and that alone was a win. You know what's crazy? I started realizing that when we take control of the small things, that feeling of power starts spreading to bigger ones. I wasn't waiting for a miracle anymore, I was creating my own path, even if it was in small steps. Every time I looked at that jar with saved money, I felt stronger. I had control over something, and that gave me the courage to keep trying. That's when I understood that sometimes, big victories start with small decisions. The decision not to spend on something unnecessary, not to drown in sadness, and to try even if it was with something simple. Because, deep down, every choice we make is another step toward our goal. It wasn't a drastic change, but it was enough to remind me that, in the end, I was in control. And at that moment, that was all I needed. I knew I couldn't just keep saving money. Saving is important, of course, but without investing in something truly worthwhile, progress would be too slow. The idea of investing gave me a bit of anxiety, I admit. But at the same time, I felt it was the next step. I didn't have much money, so my options were limited. I started researching simple things, investments that anyone could start without needing a large capital. That's when I came across something that caught my attention: online courses. I had always loved learning, and I knew that if I specialized in something, I could create more opportunities for my future. I decided to invest in a course that taught me how to create and manage a small business. The cost wasn't exorbitant, but at that stage in my life, it felt like a huge sacrifice. However, the fear of not trying was even greater. I remembered something my mother always said: if you don't invest in yourself, who else will? I started studying with dedication. At first, it was tough. I felt lost, like trying to put together a puzzle without knowing what the final picture looked like. But little by little, I began to understand the concepts: how to structure a simple business plan, manage finances, and even sell something strategically. The most interesting part was realizing that what I was learning wasn't just for building a big empire but for improving my life in practical ways. Learning how to organize my time, be more productive, and think of solutions for problems I hadn't even realized existed. Each lesson was another step toward my growth. Of course, financial returns didn't come immediately. That would have been a dream. But what I did notice was that by investing in myself, I started to see myself differently. I was truly taking action to change my life. I wasn't just waiting for an opportunity to fall into my lap, I was creating my own opportunities. I felt more confident, more capable, and that alone was already a huge step forward. Deep down, I knew I was doing the right thing. With every course module I completed, I felt closer to reaching my goals. And most importantly, I was building something that would be worth it in the future. I had learned a valuable lesson: saving money is a good foundation, but to truly transform your life, you need to invest in what makes sense for your growth. And that doesn't just apply to money. Investing time, effort, and learning new skills, those were my first real investments. Not in something physical, but in myself. You know, I always knew that real change starts when you take action, but what I didn't realize was that it happens much more quietly than I had imagined. After investing in my learning, I started applying what I had learned. And yes, at first, everything felt new, everything felt confusing. But little by little, something incredible began to happen. Results started to show. I had learned how to manage my time better, set realistic goals, and most importantly, how to start selling something I knew people needed. So, I decided to try something that, until that moment, had seemed like a bold idea. I offered my services to help others organize their finances. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to take the first step. I started small, offering my help to friends and family, people I felt comfortable with. At first, things were slow. Some accepted, others didn't. But believe me, what excited me the most was realizing that when people started seeing what I was offering, they became interested. And then, something amazing happened. Someone I had helped for free, just to test my methods, recommended me to someone else. And that person actually hired me. I couldn't believe it. It was my first real achievement. It wasn't something huge, but at that time, it was everything I needed to know I was on the right path. That first accomplishment, no matter how small, gave me an indescribable feeling that I was truly doing something valuable. Something inside me said, I can keep going. I can make this work. And when I looked at the person who had trusted my work, I felt proud of myself. I knew I was building a solid foundation, and each client I gained was proof that I was heading in the right direction. I hadn't become rich, but at that moment, I had something even more valuable: confidence in my own abilities. The feeling that, with the right effort, I could achieve any goal. And no, it wasn't easy, and there was still so much to learn, but that first step gave me the strength to keep going. Because when you achieve something, no matter how simple, you realize that anything is possible. You just have to take the first step, even if it's a small one. After that first achievement, something changed inside me. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew it would be worth it. It felt like I had found a spark, something that, even though small, could grow if I kept fueling it. But there was something I needed to learn: patience. I thought that after landing my first client, everything would happen quickly, that things would magically fall into place. But in reality, it was a much slower process. I kept offering my services, looking for ways to help more people, but the responses weren't always positive. There were days when no one showed up, days when I questioned whether I was really on the right path. That's when I realized I needed to prepare for the planting phases. Just like in a harvest, not everything grows at the same time. I started seeing my journey as something long-term. Every client I helped, every person I assisted, was like a seed I was planting. And I knew that if I kept nurturing what I was building, the results would come at the right time. I invested more in what made sense to me. I started creating small educational materials to help people organize their finances in a simple way, with practical tips that I had used myself. I also began sharing more of what I was learning, whether through conversations or social media. That attracted more attention. People who didn't know me before started asking about what I did. Over time, I realized I wasn't just helping others, I was building a reputation. And that reputation was based on something very simple: honesty. I wasn't pretending to be a millionaire expert, nor was I selling false promises. I was just sharing what I knew and what was working for me. And then came the big moment. A small local business, struggling to manage its finances, reached out to me. They had heard about me through someone I had helped. It was a much bigger challenge than I was used to, but I decided to take it on. I spent nights analyzing their numbers, creating simple, practical strategies they could implement immediately. In the end, when I presented the plan, I saw something in their eyes: hope. And a few weeks later, when they told me they were seeing improvements, I felt a sense of pride I had never felt before. That's when I realized I was on the right path. And more than that, I understood that every stage of my journey was preparing me for something bigger. The key wasn't to rush the process, but to trust it. The harvest comes to those who plant with dedication and nurture what they build with patience. I will never forget the moment when everything started to change. It was as if the pieces were finally falling into place, but it wasn't by chance. It was because I was prepared for what was coming. After helping that small business, things started to gain momentum. I had already planted many seeds, and some of them began to bloom at the same time. A friend of the business owner I had helped reached out to me. He wanted to know if I could assist him in organizing a similar project. It was an opportunity one couldn't pass up. This time, I felt more confident. I already knew what to do, but I decided to prepare even more. I spent hours studying similar cases, refining my strategies, and when I finally sat down with him to present my plan, I realized something: I was getting good at what I did. Not just good. I was becoming excellent. And you know what was even more surprising? He paid me for my work before even seeing the results. That was a milestone for me. Someone trusted my knowledge and dedication so much that they were willing to invest in me without hesitation. That showed me that all the effort, all the patience, was starting to pay off. Over time, I kept accumulating small victories. They weren't huge transformations, but each client I helped, each person who recommended me to someone else, was a step forward. And with each step, I learned more about dealing with different people, about solving problems that once seemed impossible. But the real turning point came when I decided to take a bigger risk. I had saved part of the money I was earning, and instead of letting it sit idle, I chose to invest in myself again. I created a small online course. Nothing too complex, just a practical guide based on what I already knew worked. I remember the nervousness I felt when I launched that course. Would anyone buy it? Would it really work? And when the first sale appeared on my screen, I cried. It was as if all the weight I had carried for so long was finally being rewarded. It wasn't just about the money. It was about realizing that I had built something. Something valuable, something that could help even more people. And from that moment on, everything truly started to grow. I wasn't just surviving, I was building a life I had never imagined possible. And you know what was the most incredible part? Realizing that if I could get this far, anyone can. No matter how difficult it seems at first, the secret is to keep going, even when it feels like nothing is working. Because sometimes, change is just one step away. You know that feeling of looking back and no longer recognizing the person you used to be? Not because you've forgotten where you came from, but because you realize how much you've grown, how much you've changed. That's exactly how I feel today. Every tear, every no, every sleepless night was worth it because they brought me here. If someone had told me years ago that I would be sharing this story, I wouldn't have believed it. I would have felt too small, too incapable. But you know what's funny? The strongest people I know didn't start out strong. They started with fear, with doubts, but they chose to try anyway. That's what I did. I tried. I didn't know if it would work, but I decided that if I was going to fail, I would fail trying, not by giving up. And that made all the difference. Today, my work is not just something that supports me financially, it's something that gives meaning to my life. I wake up every day knowing that I can help someone, that my story can inspire others who are where I once was. But you know what? None of this would have been possible if I had stayed stuck in the belief that you can't start from scratch or that I don't have the talent for this. You don't need to have everything planned out. You just need to take the first step and keep going, even when it feels difficult. And if you've made it this far, it's because, in some way, this story has touched you. Maybe you're going through something similar, or maybe you know someone who is. What I want you to know is that starting over is not the end, it's the chance to build something even better. So here's my invitation, don't wait for the perfect moment, because it doesn't exist. Start with what you have, with what you know, and trust the process. You are stronger than you think, and I know you can go much further than you imagine. If this story inspired you, if you believe it can help others, I invite you to be part of this journey. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we can show that it doesn't matter where we start, what matters is where we want to go. And above all, never forget, impossible is just a word for those who don't try.